Firstly, let me say that I came into Live a Live not knowing what to expect. I came away very pleasantly surprised. This game is good, much better than you'd first think. With that said, let's get right into it. Live a Live takes the form of 7 separate mini-stories, each focusing on a single character in their own self-contained universe. Here's how I rate them, starting from worst to best. In at number 7 we have the present day chapter starring the up-and-coming fighter Masaru Takahara. This short chapter takes the form of a kind of Street Fighter parody. You battle 6 fighters, learning their moves as you go, before a showdown with an unexpectedly bloodthirsty boss. It's short and to the point, and the combat isn't particularly compelling, to be honest. I feel like this chapter could have used some more work on the story to flesh it out a bit. Number 6 on my list is the Prehistory chapter, focusing on the tribesman Pogo. This is a larger chapter with a focus on comedy. The voice acting for the various cavemen is genuinely entertaining, and there's even a cute cave girl to be seen here. The battles are somewhat mediocre though, and I felt like there was a bit too much roaming through the open world. Random encounters typically aren't my cup of tea, and there's a lot of them to be found here, including an absolutely brutal one against a near unbeatable boss. If you happen to run into him, you'll likely have to reload your save and get set back a fair distance in the process. All in all, not a bad chapter, but not one of the jewels of the game. Coming next to number 5, we have the Near Future. In this chapter, you play as a young man named Akira Tadokoro, who happens to have the ability to read people's minds. If you're a fan of Gundam-style shows, you'll definitely enjoy what plays out here. The Steel Titan giant robot segment is a lot of fun. I didn't care too much for the main character's backstory personally, but I liked Lawless, his brother-in-arms, who has to be one of the coolest characters in the whole game.
Who am I? Isn't it obvious? I'm a local businessman!
The battle sequences are reasonably interesting with a variety of different enemies to take down as you follow the fairly well-structured plot. It's a pretty fun giant robot-themed romp. Chapter number 4 on my list actually has one of my favourite characters, the female martial artist Lei Kugo. In this interesting story set in Imperial China, you'll play as an aging kung fu master who's desperate to pass on his legendary arts to some loyal disciples before he passes away. Things play out fairly quickly and in a rather linear fashion, and without spoiling too much, there's an interesting turn of events before you reach a fairly predictable final battle. It's nothing too groundbreaking, but it's handled well, and the combat is good fun, with some entertaining moves as you'd expect from a martial arts themed chapter. Then we have chapter number 3, arguably the most complex one the game has to offer, Twilight of Edo Japan. Oboro Maru, the shinobi in training, is tasked with infiltrating a hostile lord's castle and rescuing a prisoner, with the fate of Japan hanging in the balance. There are multiple ways to complete your mission. You can either go for no kills at all, using a special stealth ability that hides you from enemies, or you can try to eliminate all 100 foes, or perhaps just some of them. It's not always clear what you're supposed to do in this chapter, and there are some frustratingly vague moments where they really don't hold your hand at all. That's not surprising considering the age of the original game, which was made back in the 90s after all. It's still a unique and entertaining chapter though. Number 2 on my list is the Wild West chapter, featuring a wanderer known as the Sundown Kid. This one just has a great Wild West setting, a unique mechanic where you can set up defences to protect a town in danger from some bandits, and some great voice acting throughout. The combat is pretty fun and satisfying with plenty of rootin', tootin', gunslinging action, and the story's as you'd expect from a spaghetti western. Overall a great if somewhat short chapter, but one of the best in the game for sure. Lastly we have what is in my opinion the best chapter in the game, The Distant Future. Here you'll control a cute looking robot named Cube, who's been developed by a crewman aboard a transport ship that's carrying some dangerous cargo, a huge, dangerous beast to be precise. Everything starts out fine at first as you're introduced to the various crew on the ship and their roles, but trouble quickly starts brewing. This chapter focuses largely on using your brain to solve the mysteries taking place on the vessel, with very little actual combat, but the final boss of the chapter is a fun battle that goes a long way towards making up for that. I like the characters, especially Corporal Darth. Overall, with its strong story and interesting setting, this feels like the standout chapter in the game. How do you feel about each chapter? To say any more of the game's content would be entering spoiler territory, but all in all, Live a Live is a great retro RPG, and Square Enix have done a beautiful job of remastering it on Nintendo Switch. Definitely worth a play. If you're a fan of these types of games, you won't be disappointed.
Peace!